When professional drone pilot Ronnie was hired to film in the Himalayas, he expected rocks, snow, and maybe a few mountain goats. What he didn't expect was to fly his drone over a restricted zone and spot two massive structures buried between the peaks, structures that had no business being 18,000 feet above sea level. What he found inside changed the way he sees the world. And honestly, it might change the way you see it too. Ronnie had been flying drones professionally for over a decade, and even longer just for the love of it. He'd worked on Hollywood films, nature documentaries, and international sporting events. He thought he'd seen everything a camera could capture. He was wrong. The job seemed straightforward. A production company needed aerial footage of the high Himalayas for a wildlife documentary about animals surviving in extreme cold, pristine mountaintops, untouched snow, maybe some golden eagles riding thermals. Simple enough on paper, but when Ronnie heard the details, he hesitated. The filming location sat at over 17,000 feet. Temperatures would drop well below freezing, and the only way to reach it was on foot. Ronnie sat in his apartment staring at the email for 2 full days. He almost said no. Then he saw the budget they were offering. It was more than he'd made in the last 6 months combined. He typed back one word. When, 2 weeks later, Ronnie landed in a small village in northern Nepal at the base of the Himalayas. The air was already thinner here, and the peaks above him looked like they belonged on another planet. His first task was finding a guide, someone local who knew the mountain trails and could keep him alive up there. That turned out to be harder than he thought. The villagers were polite but cautious. Outsiders came through occasionally, mostly trekkers or climbers, but a man with cases of expensive equipment asking to go off the beaten path raised eyebrows. For 2 days, nobody would commit. Ronnie was starting to worry about his deadline. If he didn't deliver the footage within a week, the production schedule would slip and his pay would get cut. On the third morning, a Sherpa named Tenzin approached him at the tea house. Tenzin was in his 50s, quiet, built like the mountain itself. He'd guided expeditions for 30 years. He listened to Ronnie's plan, nodded slowly, and said he'd take him. He also brought along his nephew, Dorje, a younger man who carried twice his weight in gear without complaining once. The three of them set off that afternoon. The climb was brutal. Ronnie considered himself fit, but the altitude humbled him within the first hour. His lungs burned, his fingers went numb inside his gloves. At night, huddled in a small tent, Ronnie called his daughter on a satellite phone. She was 7. She asked him if he'd seen any Yetis. He laughed for the first time in days and told her he'd keep looking. After a day and a half of climbing, they reached the filming zone. The weather broke just enough to give Ronnie clear skies. He unpacked his drone, a top-of-the-line quadcopter built for extreme conditions, and got to work. The footage was stunning. Sweeping ridgelines dusted in white, close-ups of snow crystals catching the light, a pair of Himalayan tars, wild mountain goats picking their way across an impossibly steep cliff face. Ronnie felt the familiar rush of knowing he was capturing something special. But there was a problem. Tenzin pointed out prayer flags and small stone markers scattered along the ridgelines, signs of human presence. For a nature documentary, that wouldn't work. The production company wanted untouched wilderness, no evidence of civilization anywhere in the frame. Tenzin had a suggestion. Beyond the ridge to the north, there was a section of the mountains that was completely restricted. No trekkers, no climbers, no aircraft. The Nepali government had declared it off-limits years ago, though Tenzin had never been told exactly why. The restriction kept everyone out, which meant the landscape would be exactly what Ronnie needed, pristine and undisturbed. There was an obvious problem. Flying a drone over restricted airspace was illegal. Ronnie weighed the risk. He'd spent thousands getting here. His deadline was closing in, and technically, drone regulations in this region were still vague and barely enforced at this altitude. He looked at Tenzin. Tenzin shrugged and said, "Your machine, your choice. Now, before I continue, if you're enjoying this story, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button and the bell. We drop stories like this every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next." Ronnie launched the drone from the edge of the restricted zone and sent it north, skimming over peaks that probably hadn't been filmed in years, maybe ever. The footage was breathtaking, empty, ancient, enormous. This was exactly what the documentary needed. Then his battery warning beeped. 10% remaining. Time to bring it home. Ronnie swung the drone around for one final wide shot, a slow panoramic sweep to capture the full scale of the range. He was watching the monitor, framing the shot, when something caught his eye. Between two peaks, nestled in a wide natural basin, were two structures. They looked like domes, partially buried under snow and ice, their surfaces glinting faintly where the sun hit exposed glass panels. Ronnie's hands froze on the controls. Tenzin, come look at this. Tenzin studied the monitor for a long moment. His expression shifted from curiosity to confusion. He'd spent his entire life in these mountains. He'd never seen or heard of anything like this. The battery hit 5%. Ronnie had a choice: fly closer or save the drone. Every instinct told him to investigate, but losing a $60,000 drone on a mountainside wasn't an option. Reluctantly, he brought it back. It landed with 2% remaining. He should have packed up. He should have taken his footage and gone home. But Ronnie couldn't stop staring at that last frame on the monitor. 2 domes, hidden in the mountains. In a zone the government didn't want anyone near. He looked at Tenzin. Can we get there on foot? Tenzin hesitated. Dorje shook his head immediately and said he'd wait at camp. Tenzin looked at the monitor one more time, then looked at Ronnie. 1 hour, we look, we leave. They crossed into the restricted zone. There was no fence, no checkpoint, just a weathered sign in Nepali that Tenzin translated simply as "Entry Forbidden." The snow beyond it was untouched, perfectly smooth, like no human had walked here in years. An hour of hard climbing brought them to the basin. The smaller dome rose in front of them, far bigger than it had looked on the monitor. Maybe 40 feet across. Its glass panels were thick, clouded with age, and buried under layers of ice on one side. Ronnie knelt and scraped snow off a section of glass. He pressed his face close and waited for his eyes to adjust. Through the fogged panel, he could make out soil. Dark, rich soil, spread across the entire floor of the dome like a massive planting bed. Tenzin found something on the other side. A steel door built into the mountainside, half buried in packed snow. They dug it out with their hands. Beside the door was an electronic panel, dead. Its screen was cracked, and a faded government seal was printed above it. This installation was old. Whatever power source it once had was long gone. The door itself had corroded at the hinges. Tenzin put his shoulder into it, and after 3 hard shoves it ground open, releasing a breath of stale, warmer air from inside. They stepped into a concrete tunnel lit by faint emergency strips that still somehow glowed along the floor. At the end of the tunnel, a second door stood open, its lock mechanism rusted in the unlocked position. Beyond it was a vast underground chamber beneath the dome. The air was warmer here, insulated by the mountain itself. Rows of metal shelving lined the walls, stacked with sealed containers, canned food, water purification tablets, medical kits, blankets. All of it dusty, all of it decades old, but carefully organized. And then there was the soil field. Raised beds stretching across the chamber floor under the dome's glass ceiling, designed to grow food using natural sunlight filtered through the panels above. An underground farm at 18,000 feet. Ronnie found a faded placard bolted to the wall near the entrance. Tenzin read it slowly, translating word by word. Emergency continuity shelter. Government use only. Authorized personnel. It was a doomsday bunker, built decades ago, probably during the Cold War, designed to shelter high-ranking officials if the worst ever happened. Stocked, sealed, and forgotten. The restricted zone wasn't protecting wildlife or sacred land, it was protecting this. Ronnie stood in the middle of that chamber for a long time, looking at shelves of supplies meant for people who would inherit whatever was left of the world. He thought about his daughter asking about Yedis. He thought about the fact that somewhere, probably in multiple somewheres, bunkers like this still existed. Ready, waiting. And the rest of us would never know. Tenzin touched his arm. We go now. They left everything exactly as they found it, shoved the door closed, let the snow begin covering their tracks. Back at camp, Ronnie deleted the dome footage from his memory card. He kept the mountain shots, the goats, the snow. He delivered the documentary footage on time and collected his pay. He never told the production company. He never posted it online. He and Tenzin agreed on the mountain that some discoveries aren't meant to be shared. They're meant to be understood. Ronnie still flies drones, he still chases incredible shots in impossible places. But every now and then, when he's up high enough and the world below looks small and fragile, he thinks about that bunker in the mountains. And he wonders how many more are out there, buried under snow, waiting for a day he hopes never comes.
If this story stuck with you, leave a comment telling me, would you have gone through that door? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I'll see you in the next one.